Civil disobedience is a powerful tool in social justice work. The law, it's not sacred, and to challenge it shakes our consciousness. If you can take that radical action in a way that genuinely speaks to everybody else, then you not only have their attention, you have their inspiration, and you build movements that way. Number one, preparation. Calibrate what you are asking for and how you ask for it so that you can win it. Then you've got to choose your strategy. You've got to choose a tactic, a target that can successfully grab public attention. Then you've got to make sure that your execution is flawless. The media will look for every opportunity to delegitimize you. If there is one misstep, one act of violence, it's over.
I've never been in the White House, but the ability to chain myself to the outside of the White House turned out to be important and empowering, and anyone can do it. Most of us don't have huge sums of money. All of us have a body that we can put in the way. I want to say very clearly that civil disobedience is but one tool in the activist toolbox. It's not the first one that you should reach for, and if you use it all the time, like any other tool, it's going to get dull. That said, civil disobedience has a role to play. Nobody should have to go to jail about climate change. In a rational system, that would be the last thing that would happen. But because the way power is distributed in our world, sometimes we have to.
One of the central threats to democracy today is the corporate capture of government. We are up against tremendous resources, and those resources are smart. The corporation goes straight to the politician that's going to be on the committee that's going to pass the law that they want to pass and threatens their re-election at exactly the right time. The strategy of global corporations on climate change was partly to recognize that they had a trump card with the United States government. They could stand in the way of global action by blocking American action. There's a level of state failure in the United States. The legislature is bought and paid for by oil companies and other companies. We have to roll back corporate capture of our governments if we want to try and fix these problems that conflict directly with their industry bottom line.
There's nothing radical about anything we're talking about. Radicals work at oil companies. If you are willing to get up in the morning and make your fortune by altering the chemical composition of the atmosphere, and you're willing to do it once scientists have told you what would happen, and once you've seen it happen, once you've watched the Arctic start to melt, if you're willing to do that, then you're a radical, and our job is to try and check that radicalism.
An investigation is underway into ExxonMobil, the huge oil company, buried research about the effects of climate change.
Reports suggest more than 30 years ago, Exxon's own scientists were taking climate change projections into account in its operational plans.
Exxon was on the cutting edge of science. They wanted to be on the cutting edge of science 40 years ago on climate change. They understood that farther down the road, if the science was accurate, there would be limits placed on emissions from fossil fuels. So their strategy at that time was that we want to have a say in what those limits look like.
When their senior scientists told their senior executives what was coming, Exxon started making sure that all its drilling rigs were climate-proofed so that they could withstand the rising sea level. But they did not tell the rest of us, just the opposite.
Around 1989, there was a shift in the thinking at the executive level. And that was when Exxon joined this group called the Global Climate Coalition, which sounds very green. But in fact, they were put together to fight any policy reaction to climate change.
Exxon and others ended up hiring the veterans of the tobacco industry to try and make the same basic argument that the cigarette guys had made.
After 3 decades of investigation, no causal link between smoking and disease has been established.
Scientific evidence remains inconclusive as to whether human activities affect the global climate.
It was effective, and it cost us a generation's worth of time.
We just recently crossed 400 parts per million CO2 in the atmosphere. We're literally releasing all of that CO2 that got buried underneath Earth's surface over 100 million years. And we're releasing it over a time frame of 100 years, 1 million times faster than nature buried it. That is without precedent. It's unclear that living things, including human beings, can adapt to changes that occur that quickly.
In the Philippines, at least 6,000 farmers were blocking a highway to demand the government provide rice.
The farmers are starving. Behind all this is a rise in global temperatures, causing the whole region to suffer the worst drought in more than 20 years.
We've begun to see serious stress on the global food systems. We simply won't be able to grow enough food to feed 10 billion people in a warming world.
There's a study that looks at temperatures to come in much of the Middle East. And what they found was the combination of heat and humidity for stretches of time by 2100 would not be compatible with human life.
The new study published yesterday finds climate change exacerbated the worst drought ever in modern Syria, aggravating social unrest in the country and helping to push it over the brink into civil war.
A record 1 million refugees and migrants have now crossed into Europe in Europe's worst refugee crisis since the Second World War.
In other words, the very real security threat posed by climate change is only going to get worse.
You've got to put your bodies upon the gears and upon the wheels, upon the levers, upon all the apparatus, and you've got to make it stop. And you've got to indicate to the people who run it, to the people who own it, that unless you're free, the machine will be prevented from working at all.
Social movements are different from ordinary politics in that they are not simply about how to divide up the goods, but about what a good is. It enters a domain that goes beyond immediate self-interest into what's required of us as responsible human beings.
The secret of civil disobedience is moral clarity. Gandhi said,